We're good? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Awesome. Welcome to the Daily Huddle. Today is Friday. Today's the last day of February. February is gone, February 28th. Thank you all for being here. My name is Giovanni, and normally I co-lead this conversation with my business partner and mentor and friend, Sorel Katan. But today he is actually leading a workshop. So I get to be with you today, and I am excited and honored to be in your life with today's conversation. Today we're going to be talking about a conversation that I want to invite you to listen for yourself while we talk about a topic that is easy to discuss about others, or in a historical fashion, if you will, or in a historical context. I like to invite you to see it also for yourself. And the topic of today is the difference between being feared versus being respected as a leader. Those two different styles of leadership, if you will, the style of being feared and that exercising command through fear. And I think that most people, most parents, most bosses, they don't really want to create a culture where people fear them, or an environment around them where people fear them per se. I think what people are looking for is for compliance. People are looking for commitment. People are looking for progress. People are looking for high standards. However, they fall at, I say, accidentally first at creating a culture where people fear them. And then also, I also feel, now this is not true per se, but I also I also feel that some people intuitively really try to avoid creating a culture of fear around them at home. They don't necessarily want their children to fear them. They want their children to be inspired by them, by the role model, if you will, by the mother or the father or the grandparent. And they want to create an environment where inspiration is happening. It's actually what's moving the needle forward. And those two aspects are in, I want to say it this way, are in every household. So I want you to listen to this conversation. I'm inviting you to listen to this conversation in the context of you listening for your own household, where you exercise leadership in your own home, right? And if you live alone, then certainly take it to your workplace, right? So that you can see this conversation in the blueprint of your life, rather than just listening for historical contexts that, in my experience, doesn't really make the difference that I am committed to making in your life. So let's talk about the cost of a fear-based leadership. Let's start there. And you could see why it has its benefits, if you will, to create a culture of fear around you, or why your boss creates a culture of fear around you, or why your father, your mother, your grandparents created a culture of fear at home. And one of the aspects is because fear makes people to comply, to follow orders, right? And compliance allows for people to follow order. And if people follow order, then there is a certain order, certain control that allows, at least one would think, for progress. One would think that way. Intuitively, a person will think, well, if I have people following me through compliance and fear, and then they follow the structure and they follow it, then it creates this order and this kind of structure for progress. Now, the challenge of that that you could see if you're living in that environment, or if at work you're living that environment, is that it won't necessarily create innovation, or people won't necessarily go beyond the survival of that structure, because they're afraid of it. And in a work environment, in the short term, it creates compliance and order, if you will. However, in the long term, it creates stress, burnout, and a lack of trust in the leadership. So it creates this high turnover culture. So if you are a boss, or if you are inside of a culture where there is fear, then more than likely there is this high turnover. And if there is a high turnover, or a culture, a toxic culture, then the company spends a lot of time and resources retraining new people so that they can understand the vision and understand the processes. And then only then it's easier to create innovations, and innovation then doesn't happen. Creativity stifles, and then that company really creates this sort of stagnation. And so that style of compliance through fear, if you will, doesn't allow for the company to grow. It doesn't allow for people to take risks, to innovate, to speak. So it won't work in the long term. So business leaders needs to really pay attention if they have that environment around them where people are afraid. They got to look at that, because although it feels good to have people fear you, it might feel good in the context of the ego. It might feel good. However, progress in your company will stifle. Creativity won't be possible, high turnovers, and then most of your company is going to stay in that place just to survive the culture where there is a high turnover. But progress, creativity is highly, highly unlikely. So that's one of the aspects that one needs to notice, right? In the context of politics, which one, it's fun to talk to, but it's fun to study, fun to talk to, fun to create conflict with our friends and neighbors and family, but it doesn't really make the difference in the household. But let's talk about the difference that we're committed to making. But let's talk about in the context of political leaders who lead through fear. And it's a very intuitive kind of style, right? Let's talk about Joseph Stalin, for example. He ruled the Soviet Union through executions and purges, intense surveillance, and it did lead to an industrialized country, for sure. It came at an enormous human cost, millions of lives lost. However, it created a culture of fear. And in a culture of fear, there is zero innovation from individuals. So one could say that although they experience progress, innovation through entrepreneurship, they got stagnated. They're quite not competing at the level of the US, or at the level of China, or at the level of Japan, or at the level of Singapore, at the level of Europe, because people became afraid to think in the context of innovation, in the context of competition, if you will. And that stagnated the country. And it is easy to see how now in the current administration and political administration that Russia is living through, and it's going through, um, the partnership through commercialization with Ukraine is not possible. We must invade to take over the natural resources. We must do it that way. Partnership is not possible. And that and it's costing now millions of lives. and millions of dollars in resources. And I'm sure at some point they will stop fighting, and then they will achieve some sort of agreement and some sort of peace agreement. At some point, God knows whether soon or not, but progress, highly unlikely through fear-based. Highly unlikely. And so you want to see how, which model of leadership you are adopting or you are interpreting from the current events, right? There is another kind of leadership that we have studied throughout history, or we have seen as a model throughout our history, is leadership through respect. And the example can be Nelson Mandela, right? He could have ruled through fear after the end of the apartheid, but instead, he led through reconciliation. His leadership created a long-term progress, certainly unity where there was not possibility of unity. And one could make a real argument that Nelson Mandela created a more stable South Africa. One could make the real argument for that. Is it possible? Is it a long shot from where people would like to see South Africa? For sure. But did it create an environment where progress was possible and innovation was possible through reconciliation? That's for sure. One of the things, certainly an aspect that we can learn throughout history, is that more war doesn't create creativity. It doesn't create progress. There's a moment of reconciliation that is necessary for progress. Certainly, after World War II, and the United States got involved in the global conflict, particularly with Japan, right? And Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, and the United States attacks Hiroshima, and it creates that real context for escalating an arms struggle, right? And if they would have continued to have a fear-based kind of control, reconciliation wouldn't be possible. And then the two countries could not become allies. And Japan could have not rebuilt itself the way it did. So this is fear kills innovation, respects builds growth. And you want to see it for yourself, and you want to see if at home, in the environment that you lead, so that this doesn't become a historical conversation, but see if in the environment where you lead, at home or at work, there is fear-based kind of style, or there is respect kind of style, inspiration kind of style. When we look at businesses, one of the ones that comes to mind is Steve Jobs, because he was so out there. It was easy for some people like myself to study his leadership throughout his life, right? And at the beginning, his early days, he was certainly a fear-based leader. He was known for his aggressiveness, driven management style in the early days of Apple. He had ruthless expectations and firing, and he did achieve results, right? He did achieve results. His visionary style was able to enroll the world to create a new brand for computers. And he had this innovation where he used the Apple, and it was outside the box, and he was generating commercials at the Super Bowls, and it enrolled the world in the creation of computers. Yet even though he had the support of banks and investors, and he did attract great minds for the opportunity of innovation, he was doing a wonderful job. He couldn't quite create a culture for innovation. in his company. And the people who study Apple know that Apple, in many instances, was at the brink of bankruptcy. That even Bill Gates supported Apple's survival at some point. Then Steve Jobs has this big issue, and then you could see the movie or read the book, and then he doesn't necessarily gets fired. That's actually that's not what really happened. But his leadership does get challenged, and the board of directors choose to go in the direction of a different leadership innovative style. And Steve Jobs said, well, if you're going to go in a different style, if you're going to adopt the other guy's ideas, then I'm leaving. And he left. And the world heard that as if he was being fired, but he didn't get fired. He just left. However, when he left and he went to build Pixar and these other companies, he did discover something. He did have an epiphany on the way in which he was leading his ideas. And eventually he came back, and then he had another leadership style in the later years, which it wasn't fear-based. He learned the hard lessons, and then when he returned, he became rather an inspiring leader rather than ruled by fear. This completely shifted the culture of the company, and at some point, and I don't know if Apple still is the most profitable company in the world. I don't know if it still is, but at some point it was the most profitable company in the planet. And he was able to create that and leave that legacy through being a leader that inspires rather than a leader that is feared. It's a massive difference, and you want to see which is your leadership style, what you are doing. You got to find a way to take this conversation and put it in your life. Not just to study historical figures, business leaders. No, look at your own style. That's what makes the difference in your life. That's for sure. One of the leaders that I found very interesting to talk about is Travis Kalanick, and he was the CEO of Uber. And this guy was fascinating in the way in which he was able to see how he can put two worlds together, like the world that people need a job in an industrialized countries. They need to make extra income, and they have a car. And then if we create an application where people, instead of calling a taxi, they can call anyone to drive them anywhere. I can have my neighbor to drive me anywhere, and we can connect those two needs through an app, and they call that app Uber. And it became this huge success in the world. I don't know what country you can go to now where you don't find Uber or some version of that application. However, he was known for a cutthroat, hyper-aggressive culture that prioritized results over people. And he faces now huge legal issues, internal toxicity, and eventually he was forced to resignation. And so when you're a leader who's leading through fear, one of the predictable outcomes is that you will not be part of that legacy for a long time. Maybe you started it, but you don't quite keep the opportunity of building a legacy, given that it's not sustainable. There was also a leader another leader, business leader, that is a good example, who transformed Microsoft. And his name is Satya Nadella, where when he inherited Microsoft, it was a culture that had stagnation. It was a competitive culture, but rather more toxic culture. And it was a culture that created a fear-based environment. And when he came into Microsoft, he prioritized emotional intelligence, collaboration, and innovation. So he created a culture where leaders discover with what we call emotional intelligence, how to create an environment where people are not combative to each other. People always compete, but they're not combative. And he transformed Microsoft, and it's a completely different culture. So one of the things that I wanted to create in this conversation, and I want to hear your comments now, your yeah buts, what are you taking away, whatever you want to say about this conversation. But certainly, one of my commitments in today's conversation is that you allow yourself to see what's your leadership style. Are you at home or at work? Are you someone that your children fear, or are you someone that your children are inspired by you? And you being able to discover the difference, you can see which one will lead to progress and which one will lead to short-term control, but not necessarily progress, innovation, and creativity. So that's the conversation I wanted to bring for today. I want to hear from you. What are your comments, yeah buts, questions? Love to hear what is percolating over there. Kurt, do you have any thoughts over there where you're at? Ronald, Irma, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah. Oh, can you hear
Oh,
me?
okay. Yeah, go ahead, Ronald.
Yeah. So it's really interesting conversation. What I'd like to put into context is the word culture. What, I mean, I guess you may not have this answer now, but I'm kind of really trying to understand, is there a set of culture for each type of company, or is there yeah, I guess the culture for or is there a Lisa culture, around that is adaptable, or that we could yeah. I mean, how do you not so much define culture, but uh, uh yeah, is there a list of culture? I mean, just like, I mean, well, one that you use very, which I can relate to, or I can see it in action in several leaders, is the word inspiring. That will be one culture or one type of culture. Um, so, and then you use the word combative and competitive, where people can be competitive, not combative. Um, so, so is there a list of culture that could be like, you could point out, and then when you approach a company, you say, okay, yeah, this setting is inspiring. This setting is competitive. I mean, I don't know. I guess is sort of an adjective. Um, but is there many? Is there something that is established? Is there sort of such a book that kind of really give you the characteristic of each culture? Um,
Yeah, I couldn't say that I have access to a survey that we can give to a company so that people can answer the pulse of how they feel the culture of the organization, so that we can put some sort of a label of this is a culture of collaboration, this is a culture of creativity, this is a culture of innovation or entrepreneurship. I don't, I'm sure that it does exist, a kind of survey where people can answer a significant number of questions, and it can lead for a business owner to see where the culture is. Well, to get a sense of where the culture is combative, toxic, fear-based culture, or is it collaboration, innovation, creativity kind of culture. I'm sure there are those kind of surveys that allows business leaders to see where they have created their culture, where it is. Certainly. And in my experience, for sure, what I want to add to your question is that most business leaders want to create a culture of innovation and collaboration, and regardless of the size of the company. People who are running a company, people who are accountable for the opportunity of the growth of a company, they know that they need people to work together and people to innovate. That's our only way for progress, is to have people work together and then continue to innovate and be able to address the constant global challenges and the changes. But most companies don't create a culture of collaboration and innovation. That's for sure, because there's a need for the human being to control. There's a need, an egoic need, undistinguished egoic need to create organizations where there is a chain of command. And it allows people to feel recognized, to have that chain of command. And normally, if without having intentional leadership, companies that have those chains of command create a fear-based culture where people are afraid of being fired. And they don't want to really step outside the box, because if I step outside the box, then I'm going to get fired. And then companies are also afraid of the retaliation of employees. So they create these departments, human resources departments, where they're no longer trying to empower people. They're just trying to defend the company from their people. And that's also a culture that gets created among organizations. And so the opportunity of today's conversation is to sort of this look for ways to think outside the box, to create an environment around us, whether at home or at work, of collaboration and innovation, purpose driven. Yeah. So thank you, Ronald. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, that's good. I see your point. I see your point, definitely. Well answered.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, Kurt, I saw that you were coming off mute. I'd love to hear what are your thoughts, and then we close today's conversation.
All right. Well, I mean, I tend to come into any situations that I'm participating in to just meet it right where it's at. So if there's a little bit of a debate going on or whatever, I try to come in and try to look at how they're not making a connection, and to kind of come in and alter an alternative, because they always say there's your truth, my truth, and then maybe other people's truth, and then the ultimate truth, so that's really what we're always trying to unpack, right? And I've been in a lot of situations where it's like the group think thing sets place. And so I try to take a look at like the roll call, the people participating in the conversation, and see if everybody's getting an even stake in what's coming out of the group. So a lot of times, I'm trying to see if somebody needs a little check-in or something, like, what are you thinking? How's it going? Or maybe they said something and maybe a few other people are really gelling and really making what the group's going to do and maybe dismissing. And sometimes I find there's a strong need for me to self-advocate that I'm with a group, that I'm saying something and then they're not tracking it all with what I put on the table. So I tend to keep tapping and tapping, and I'm that persistent little bug that says I'm going to keep biting until you give me the attention, that I deserve. So, and that's when something is, in the granular part of, what's going to happen. But yeah, when we're not in the thick of things, yeah, definitely that's the time to really find out what we're aspiring to, and, to have that positivity, and to help everybody remember to laugh. People kind of find that a little crazy, that they're trying to get something done pretty serious, and I just kind of throw them for a left curve, because I just come in and I put in a dad joke or something, just relax a little bit. Let's make sure everybody's enjoying what we're doing, right?
I love that. I love that. Bring a dad joke. It can create wonderful things. Bring a dad joke to the environment. Kurt, thank you for creating that and saying that. I think one of the aspects that you say that you bring to a culture, bring to a team, is this opportunity to hear everyone's thoughts and to listen for the pulse, the emotional pulse where everybody is. And also you said something really critical, which is in occasions I need to self-advocate for myself. So it's not just listening for everybody's pulse or where they are emotionally. I also need to see where am I in this conversation, because leadership might be required here also to move the ball forward and not necessarily fall for group thinking that doesn't necessarily move the ball forward. So thank you for creating that as an example of how to create a collaborative environment, an innovative environment where leadership is also possible for the players inside of that group. Decisive leadership is what I'm trying to say. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being part of the Daily Huddle. Thank you for being part of this family where we look every day to bring you different schools of thought, different ideas that are hopefully are relevant to what you're currently dealing with in your life, and allow you to give you tools that allow you to empower your life and empower your decision making to create progress, to create abundance, to create love, to create joy, to create health, and to create an environment around you where you love your life. So we'll leave you with the 8 tenets to transform your life and have a powerful weekend and create an environment of love, affinity, and progress. And the first one is love. Love always. Choose love. Find a way to love. The second one is smile, laugh, stress your cheeks. It's not that serious. It's only one life. Might as well tell a dad joke as many times as you can so you can enjoy your life with the people in it. Sleep every day. Find a way to sleep 7 hours. Let go your phone. Find a way to put the phone away and stay bored for a minute and take a break from the digital stimulation that is driving our brains a little bit crazy. Stress less. Find a way to don't take life so serious. Stress less. Eat more plant-based. Get closer to the trees. Hug the trees. Eat the trees. Avoid at all costs processed foods. At all costs, avoid processed foods. Always give your jealousy away. Give your love away. Give your resentment away. Create peace in your life. Create peace in your heart. And check your move every day, 10 minutes in the morning. 10 minutes in the morning, as soon as you get up, go for a little walk, 10 minutes, and then right after lunch, every single day. And check yourself before you wreck yourself. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you Monday. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. This is great. Have a wonderful